This message stopped my work at 2 in the afternoon, and I'm sure you might have faced it yourself. So I went back and counted. I have just spent 30 messages in a 5-hour window, and my whole limit is gone. Now the question is, where did it all go? And you know the funny part? It happened when I was doing research for this video, which is how you can save tokens. So today I will be covering everything that I have found. It's not going to be just another list of commands video. I've spent hours in watching the videos across YouTube, and this is the only video that you need to watch to understand how you can save your tokens. And we will do the fact checking at the end because some of that advice is wrong. Actually, there are just 4 things that decide your token bill or your usage limit. And once you understand that, you don't have to remember these tips, it will come to you naturally. So, without any further ado, let's jump straight into it. Let us start with these 4 mechanics. The first one is the model forgets everything between messages. Yes, you heard that right. And what Claude Code does for this is the root cause of why we spend every dollar. Number 2 is cache. And this is the only reason why a subscription is able to work for you. And we will talk about things that we are doing that are breaking this. Next up, we have output tokens, and they count. They are expensive. Now, fourth and the last is context rot. And this is the reason why a full context window is not only expensive, but actually makes your Claude dumber. And all of these are applicable as of July 2026. I'm saying this because the space is moving fast. There could be a possibility that things could change in future. Now let us understand all these 4 mechanics one step at a time because this is going to lay the foundation for the entire video. We will start with the first one, which is the model forgets everything. So here's the thing. The model has no memory. So every time you send a message, the Claude Code will resend everything, including the system prompt, the Claude.md file, all the output commands, the files it has read, your entire conversation, plus the new message that you have sent. And I'm not making this up. This is coming straight from the Anthropic docs. If you see here, it says clearly the model doesn't remember anything between requests. So Claude Code resends the full context. So this entire conversation that you see is just an illusion. It's like talking to someone who has a memory loss problem. And before replying, what they do is they reread the entire chat history from top. So what that means for you, the 30th message is going to cost you more than the 5th one, even though both of these messages have the same prompt and the same length. So it's not the message that is being priced, it's the entire context, the entire history that is behind that message. That is what we are being priced for. So if you send 3 questions in one message, that will still be treated as one message rather than sending 3 questions separately. So it's just the basic math. So that is why message batching is recommended. All of this starts even before you type anything. Let me show you how. Now, what I want you to do is open a new Claude session and without asking it anything, just type /context. This screen that you see here is my output. The numbers can vary for you because it is machine specific. But the basic idea is you already see a whole stack here. The system prompts, the tool definitions, Claude.md file, the skills description, and MCP tool names. What we just talked about is just the initial context. And on top of it, the weight goes up with file reads. If you see here, this is the context window walkthrough. And it mentions for this case, the file reads dominate context usage. Be specific in prompts. So Claude reads fewer files. If you have a debugging session where Claude is reading tens of files with thousands of lines, that's where your tokens are going. So that's where my 13 messages went. I was doing this research job where I had spin up 104 agents, and all of these agents, they were reading their own files and resending their own context. So this is the first mechanic. Everything is reset with every message that you type. So keep this in your head. And if you're wondering if that's the case with every message, if all the conversation history is being resent, then why does everybody's token doesn't finish in, let's just say, a couple of hours? Well, the answer is prompt caching. And stay with me here because at the end of this section, I will be breaking my cache live in front of you, and you will see that exact number spiking up when I do it. So what happens here is when you send in a new message, the Claude Code will resend the entire conversation. The API will check if the start of the request is identical to something it has processed recently. If the answer is yes, it's not going to reprocess it again. It will be instead read from the cache at one tenth of the input cost. So that scary reread from the mechanics one, it is nothing but just a cheap cache read on a normal tone. Only the new messages that you type in are being processed at the input cost. By the way, for the Anthropic team, this is not some nice to have feature. They take it very seriously. So if you see this blog from Tarek, who is from the Anthropic team, it clearly mentions that prompt caching is everything, and they also describes how they run alerts on this cache hit rate. And if the hit rate drops too low, they raise incidents and SEVs. So this is something that they take very seriously. I want to share one detail about caching that is important for all of you to know. If you are on a Max or Pro subscription, then the cache is live for 1 hour. So let's say if you step away for a coffee break for 5-10 minutes, then the cache is still warm. But if you're somebody who is running on a usage credit or on the API plan, then the cache is just live for 5 minutes. Do keep this in mind. So in such cases, if you come back after an hour on the subscription plan, then the whole conversation will be resent. So it's much better to start a new conversation if you're away from your screen for a long time. But here's the twist, the match is exact. If you change in anything early in the request, then everything after it is reprocessed at the full price. In case you might be thinking how you can edit the request that has already been done. So if you change the model, the effort level, or the Claude Code version, all of this is embedded in the first message of the request. So changing any of these will make the request change from what was being stored in the cache. Having understood the cache prompting, now let's talk about some of the things that we might be doing unintentionally that might be breaking the cache for you. So the number one is switching models in between of the session. So the thing is, every model is having its own cache. And when you switch a model in between of a session by using the slash model command, it will reread your entire conversation at the full price. Even though nothing has changed in the conversation, it will still reread it. So it's not being cached anymore. And if you're somebody who have seen people on YouTube claiming that switch to a cheaper model to save cost, that's not going to work because this is the reason. Switching models in between is a cache killer. The second thing is changing effort in between of sessions. If you change in efforts by typing the slash effort command, then that is going to break the cache because the cache is keyed by the effort level as well. Now, the third one is something which hurts me personally, which is resuming sessions after having updated Claude Code. So when you update the Claude Code version, there is a new system prompt and which will result in a different prefix. And in that case, the cache is going to break. And there is a saying from Anthropic, which is if you type in a new message into a long conversation after coming back from update, that message is going to be the most expensive one. With this, you will understand what is breaking your cache. Remember not to do these mistakes anymore. So the list of things that don't break the cache is even more surprising. Editing files is safe. Switching permission modes is also safe. Plan mode in and out is also safe. But there's an exception to it. So if you're using Opus Plan, then Claude considers it as a model change and the session is broken. Editing Claude.md file in between of sessions, well, that's also safe. But the catch here is it is safe because the edits have not been applied yet. Claude keeps the version from the session start until you do compact, clear, or restart the session. So in case if you might have changed Claude.md and wondering why the changes are not reflected, so this is the reason. Next up, the rewind command that is also cache safe. So rewind is just a way for us to undo the mistakes that AI have done. If you want a video on rewind, let me know in the comments below. So this is the entire list. You can screenshot this and save it for a later use. Are you interested in seeing your own cache health? Well, there's a command to do it called statusline. You can configure statusline to show cache read and cache write. This is how it will look like. So if the cache read is a high number and cache write is low, then it's healthy. But if the cache write keeps on going high with every turn, then that means the prefix is constantly getting changed and you already know what can be the culprit for it by now. Now, here's the moment that I promised. So if you see here, this is the right number. And if I switch the model in between, let's change it to Opus. Yes. And if I type in any message now, let's see these two numbers. So you just saw the write went from 1000 to 378K, and this was being done live in front of you. So what just happened is when I changed the model, the entire conversation was reprocessed at full price. That's why you saw the number for cache write spiking up. Personally, I find these things interesting when I can see them working live. If you have been enjoying the video so far, I'll recommend you guys to subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends. It will make the algorithm promote my channel to other people. So the second mechanics gives us our first lesson, which is to pick the model and effort at the start of the session and not to change in between of the session. Moving on to the third mechanics, which is output tokens. So the thing is, the input tokens are cheap. As we saw, the input cache tokens are even cheaper, but the output tokens are premium, roughly costing 5 times the input token. Now let's talk about the part that most people miss. Even thinking is counted as output tokens, and extended thinking is enabled by default in Claude Code. So depending on the model, the budget could be tens and thousands of tokens for every request. But worry not, there is a way you can control this, and that is through the effort level, which is low, medium, high, extra high, max, and ultra code. And for most of the models, the default is high. So the basic idea is if the effort is lower, there will be less thinking involved, resulting in fewer tokens. And from mechanics 2, you already know the lesson that you have to set the effort level at the start of the session. Changing it in between of the session will reset your cache. Now let us bust one of the myths out there, which is everyone keeps on saying switch to a cheaper model to save tokens. If you see on the screen, this is a tweet from Boris, who is the creator of Claude Code. In January, he posted his entire setup where he mentioned that he uses the bigger model with thinking for everything. And in his words, since you have to stir it less and it's better at tool use, it is almost always faster than using a smaller model in the end. That's what the creator of Claude Code is saying himself. Let us now take a look at what stirring actually means from the first mechanics that we talked about, which is the model will forget everything with every new message that is being sent. So every correction will require the whole history, the whole conversation to be reloaded. So the thing is, a cheaper model that needs 3 corrections would be expensive than a bigger model that can do all of it without any corrections in one go. Because the basic fundamental is we are being priced for every token that we are using rather than for every task. Now comes the last mechanics, and this has personally changed how I think about token savings and how I work in general. So the thing is, a full context window does not mean more money and more tokens. It also means that the cloud is getting double. And the Anthropic engineering team has a name for it, which is called context rot. Here I'm quoting them in their words. As the number of tokens in the context window increases, the model's ability to correctly recall information from that context decreases. As mentioned in the best practices from Anthropic, the LLM performance degrades as context fills. When the context window is getting full, Claude will start forgetting earlier instructions or making more mistakes. The context window is the most important resource to manage. So the learning is having a lean context is going to keep your Claude smarter. Now let's talk about the 2 corrections rule from Anthropic, which says that if you have corrected something in your Claude session twice and it is still wrong, then stop correcting. Instead, what you have to do is run/clear and write a better prompt with what you have learned. So the thing is, a clear session with a better prompt will always almost outperform a long session with the failed attempts. What is happening is all these failed attempts are filling in your context and they are being reread for every turn. With this, we have covered all the 4 mechanics, and now it's time to share some tips with you. I'm going to be sharing 10 tips, and you can derive each of them with these mechanics out there. And number 8 is something that you wouldn't have seen anyone talking about it. So tag along for that, and let's jump straight into it. Tip number 1 is if you are switching to an unrelated task, then use the /clear command. And if you are wondering why you should do that, so tie it back to the mechanics 1. So if you will send a new message, then the entire conversation history is being resent. You remember that, right? So in this case, if you send a new message, the old context that we have will keep on resending. and it's not like a one time cost, but you have to keep on paying for it until your entire session has ended. So, what clear will do, as the name suggests, it will clear the context and you can start the unrelated task. And in case if the previous conversation is something that you don't want to lose, what you can do is type in slash rename, name of the conversation. We are going to rename the conversation. And at any point of time in the future, when you want to get the conversation back, you can just type slash resume along with the name that you have given. That's how easy it is. Now let's talk about tip number two, which is very common. So let's say you ask Claude to do something for you and it went in the wrong direction and you want to undo it. So what you're going to do? Most people are going to use compact here, which is the wrong tool. Instead, we should use rewind, which is the double tap escape. So what rewind does, as the name suggests, it rewinds. It jumps back to a previous point that has already been cached, which means it will be cheap to use. And as the Claude Code docs say, rewinding goes to the cache prefix, whereas compaction builds a new one. So rewind is your cheap undo that you want to do. I know all these commands like clear, compact, and rewind, they can be confusing, and sometimes you are not sure when we should use what. So let me break that down for you. We have to use clear when we are done and we don't need anything from the old context. And compact is something that will be used when you have a long conversation going on, but you still want to keep on going in the same thread. You want to carry on that context. So compact will squash that whole conversation into a summary file. And how we use compact is you have to give a hint so that it knows what is the thing that matters the most. So let's say if I'm doing some changes and now the conversation has gone big, I'll compact by saying that focus on the API changes. And when this new summary file is being given to Claude Code, it's being treated as a new thing because this is something that Claude is seeing for the first time. So it's not cached. So it will charge you more than the cached prefix. And rewind, as we talked about, if there's something that you want to undo in the past, then you can do rewind and undo and fix that mistake. Tip number three is if you want to do a heavy research or log reading, then use subagents. So, as you might know, subagents run in their own separate context window. It will do all the reading and research in that window and it will send back to the main conversation just a short summary. In case you might be wondering which mechanics is this is mechanics one. So, all the file reading is happening in a separate context. You don't have to do the file reading in the main conversation. So the main conversation context is staying clean and is usable. But here's the catch. Working with the subagents, they will load up their own Claude.md files and your tools. So it could be quite expensive. Do not use it for small tasks. Instead, use it for tasks that require heavy reading. What you can do is in the subagents config, you can add in the model haiku. So it's picking up haiku for this grunt work and you don't have to spend a lot of tokens while at the same time you are able to use subagents. Tip number four is keep your claude.md file lean. And this is something which comes from Boris, who is the creator of Claude Code. He sends to keep the claude.md file under thousands of tokens. I hope by now you're able to derive which mechanics is this relating to. So this is relating to mechanics one because claude.md is something that gets resent for every conversation. So with every message that you send, the claude.md file gets resent, and the bigger the file, the more will be the cost. So keep this in mind and keep your claude.md file clean. If we talk about this claude.md file from the Claude team itself, so they keep on trimming their file with every model release because they believe that with every model that is getting smarter, there has to be less handholding. So claude.md file is not something that you create once and forget about it. You have to come back and keep on appending it and changing it. And keeping this claude.md lean is not just about the context. There's also a quality thing attached to it. So as per the Anthropic docs, if your claude.md file is bloated, then Claude can actually ignore your actual instructions. So having a lean Claude file is not just about being cheap, but this is what the model would be able to follow. With this, you might be wondering, okay, you get the idea of a lean claude.md file, but what should we put in there? So anything that Claude gets wrong repeatedly should come in there. Anything it spends a lot of tokens on, just put it in the claude.md file once instead of explaining it again and again in every session. This brings us to tip number five. So if Claude.md is a lean file, then where is everything else going into the skills? So all these skills that we have, they are not loaded for every message. They get loaded by Claude Code only when they are required. This is called progressive disclosure. And there's a flag in there called disable model invocation. If you set it to true, then the skill will be invoked only manually by hand, adding in zero context. So in case of skills, only the skills metadata is loaded, which is the skill name and description. Rest everything is loaded when required. The same thing is true for MCP servers that lets your AI agents connect to the external world. Only the MCP names are loaded in the context and everything else is deferred. But the thing is, if you want to use external services like GitHub or AWS, having a CLI will do it as a zero context cost. Of course, the MCP server scenario has been improved and it's not the situation that used to be last year. So the schemas are being deferred right now. And you can check your MCP servers by using the /mcp command. Moving on to tip number 6, and which is something that all of us has faced. Let's say you're working on a session and you have a quick question that you want to ask. So what you can do is use /btw and the answer will come up in an overlay and your conversation history won't be touched in this case. And I want you to guess this time, which mechanics is this? So this is mechanics 1 because the question that you asked in the BTW window doesn't enter your main window and that is not being resent. So your context is clean. Tip number 7 is for my friends who want to play it a little risky. So let's say you want to do something risky, but without wrecking your current session, which is going good. So what you have to do is simply type /branch, and that will create the copy of your conversation and drop you straight into that copy. But how does it work? Let's discuss the cache part. So this copy gets the cache from the parent's cache prefix. So the first message in the chat history is read from the parent's prefix. So basically, when you type in a new message into the copy, it's like experiment ground that you got literally for free without touching your main conversation. And that's the best part. Now comes the most awaited tip for the whole video, which is tip number 8. As you might know, /doctor is the skill that you can use for the setup checker. And you might also see it being referenced as /checkup. It is the same thing. /checkup is just an alias for doctor. As you can see in the docs, this doctor helps you in finding unused skills, MCP servers, and plugins, and it weights them against how much context is it costing you. And that's not it. It also trims your Claude.md files by cutting down things that Claude can figure out on its own from the code base, such as the directory layouts and dependency list, while at the same time keeping the pitfalls and rationale that shouldn't be touched. And this moves the leftover to the on-demand skills. Up here, you can see the result for the /doctor command that I run, and it will vary for you. So run the /doctor for yourself and see what could be cleaned up in your Claude Code. Moving on, so tip number 9 is stop pasting the whole documents into the chat, especially PDFs. So this is the docs for PDF support, and in here you can clearly see the cost. So for text, each page uses approximately 1500 to 3000 tokens. And on top of it, each page is converted into an image as well. So this image tokens are also being counted. So a 50 pages PDF could be tens and thousands of tokens. So this ties back to mechanics 1, where this whole thing is being sitting in the context and is being resent every time there's a new message. So what you have to do is instead point Claude to the exact file path and let it read the things that are only required. And the same logic has to be applied when we write prompts. So instead of saying that improve my code base or make my code base better, we should point to a particular file and say, hey, fix this file or improve this file, look at this file. That will be a lot more efficient way. Now, here comes the time for the final and the last tip, which is tip 10th, which may seem obvious, but we often ignore it. Let's say you want to start a task where you want to do renaming, refactoring, move some files around, or do some sort of boilerplating. Then, in that case, you can just start with the low effort. You don't need the model at the maximum capacity because, as you know, thinking also involves output tokens, and these output tokens are priced 5 times the input token. That once we start a task, we know it's going to be simple. Start it at the low effort and do not change the effort in between because that will break the cache for you. So these are all the 10 token saving tips that you have seen so far. And as you can see, they are being bundled into these four mechanics. So you just have to remember these four buckets, and rest everything you can derive from it. Feel free to take a screenshot of this for later references. Do you remember I mentioned in the beginning that I spent hours in watching videos on this topic, and there were 11 claims that were getting repeated in many of them. So I decided to verify it against the Anthropic docs, the Claude Code docs, and the verified sources. So let's see what these 11 claims are. We will do a rapid fire. Limit your chats to 4 or 5 messages. That's false. There is no source that mentions it. The best practices docs says that sometimes you should let context accumulate because you are deep in one complex problem and that history is valuable. Run compact when you hit 60%. Well, that's false as a rule. There is no percentage mentioned in the official documentation. Officially, the documentation says that we should compact at a natural break. So we shouldn't be chasing any numbers. So you should compact when you still need the context but it has gone long and bloated. And if there is a bad path or a wrong direction that Claude has gone into, then you know you have to use rewind. Auto compact triggers at 95% context. This is close but not true because there is no universal number mentioned in the documentation. Even if you check Claude code, it says that it auto compacts when the context limit is near, but it doesn't specify the context limit. The thing is, it differs with models, and these two variables that you see, it can be used to configure it. So do not trust any percentage that is being given out in any video. Even Claude Code has not made it public, like what's that fixed percentage is. It is somewhere above than 90%, but we don't know what it is exactly. But if you want to override, you can set these two environment variables for yourself. Just a side note here, if you update the second variable, which is Claude Auto Compact PCT override, you can just lower it. If you increase it, which is greater than default, then it's not going to have any effect. Let us take a look at what we have seen so far. Next up, we have put a model and a effort table into Claude.md file. Well, this can't work as described here because the Claude.md file has no mechanism to switch models. And if Claude followed this by the slash model command, then it would actually break the cache. These models and efforts exist in the skills and the subagents file, and that's where it should be handled. Next up, we have use projects. So this is a Claude.ai feature that has somehow found its way into Claude Code. But for Claude Code, this exists by default. There's one directory, one project, its own Claude.md file that is there. After 3 or 4 compacts, the summary gets messy. So take the summary and do slash clear to clear the context. Well, this number 3, 4 is something that has not been benchmarked or is not declared officially. It is something that you may face it and somebody else might not face it. So we cannot actually number these compacts, but the direction is right. What is done with compact is these older tool outputs get cleared and the rest of it is summarized. And with each time you compact, that summary is getting compounded. Then the next claim is resume instead of starting over. Well, that is true if you're doing the same task. That's what sessions are for. If you're performing the same task, then you should resume and not start over. But remember what we discussed about the cache breaking part, that let's say if you have updated a Claude Code version, then resuming is not the way to go. It will make the whole history reprocess it again, which will be costly for you. Stop uploading PDFs. That's actually right, but the logic behind this is not being explained. So what happens in PDF is it combines the text and the images token. So instead of dumping a 50 pages PDF, you can just point the file path and describe the 3 pages that you're interested in. Next up, anything you do more than twice, make it a skill. Well, that is something that could be true. So if something which is going wrong more than twice, then that becomes a part of Claude.md file. And let's say you have a workflow which you keep on repeating, then that becomes a skill. And as per Boris, if we are doing something more than once a day, then that becomes a skill. Next up, branch your chat. Well, that is true. And they don't talk about the cache bonus part that we mentioned that they get from the parent. Slash doctor shows your clutter. Well, this is absolutely true, and this is something that you should definitely try your Claude Code to see what it can clean up for you. So here's the final score of these 11 claims. Three of them are true, two of them are false, and six of them are somewhat true, but the mechanics and the numbers that they're discussing are not exactly right. So this is the exact same reason why I spent a lot more time in helping you understand the mechanics so you can think through all of them from the first principles yourself. So the message that we got in the starting that you have hit your usage limit, I hope you can answer it where it all went. It went into conversations that were being resent on every new message that I typed, and in all of those subagents that I spawned up for doing the research, and into tasks done in maximum effort that were not really required. And the catch is none of this shows on your screen. This is the bill that we cannot actually see. So now you know, use slash context to see the context window, slash usage to see where your usage is going, and slash doctor to do the cleanup. So the basic idea is all of this ties back to the four mechanics that we have discussed. Everything is resent. The cache will save you unless and until you break it. Output is the most expensive part, and thinking is counted as output. And a flat context will make your Claude dumber. If this video saved you from hitting your usage limit, then share it with a friend who keeps on complaining about hitting theirs. And this is what I have for this one. If you find this type of content useful, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.